Welcome to the Starting 11. Will West, Chris Carroll. What we do is give you the top 11 topics in the world of soccer with an EPL bend. Every Monday afternoon, we're doing a Thursday show this week with the extra match week going on. Chris, how are you today, man?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, Will. How are you doing, mate?
Doing fantastic. As a Spurs fan, it could be going a lot better, but here's hoping either changes happen. There's talk that the Spurs get sold. So there is hope that Levy's not on the board, not running the board anymore, and for me, that makes the day better.
Well, as a Wolves fan, I'll say cry me a river. You got real problems up at the top end. You should have a look down.
Fair enough. All right, so here's what we do. It's pretty fast. It's kind of quick. What we do is give you the top 11 talking points in the world of EPL soccer every single Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Like, subscribe. We will be live every single Monday. All right, Chris, let's get right to it. Point number 1. Are United now a legitimate contender to win the Premier League title?
They are. I think they are a contender, and I think this Ten Hag has really put his stamp on this team. They've tried a few coaches. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked. Ten Hag's come in, and it didn't seem immediate, but just slowly now, he seems to have got rid of a lot of deadwood. I've got to respect the guy because he's sort of quietly done it. He's not a big, high-profile character necessarily. He sorted out the Ronaldo issue. He's taken care of the Harry Maguire quietly, and all seems okay there. It's down to Harry Maguire by the sounds of things. And he's got them playing with belief. He's got players back in form. Wan-Bissaka's playing well now. Luke Shaw's playing well. So the defense looks a lot tighter than it has been. And going forward, they look good as well. Of course, with Casemiro in the middle, they're looking good. Now, the issue is, are they title contenders? Yes, they're contenders. I don't think they're going to. I think the depth of the squad is going to let them down in the end. But certainly they've turned a big corner, yeah.
Should they be contenders? Like, doesn't it speak to the fact to their incompetence in the last half decade, 6-7 years, that we wouldn't consider them contenders coming into the year? With all of Chelsea's spendings, and by taking Ronaldo off of the books, which is more than 20 million pounds this year, they are still the number 2 spender in the EPL. So they have been far and away had the highest payroll in the EPL for years. So they should have been contenders. And what Ten Hag's done is just give them competent managerial ability. That's it. He's given him a competent manager. And he's done a great job, sent Ronaldo off, got Rashford squared away. Seems to kind of have Bruno Fernandes smiling a little bit and playing, doing what it takes for the team instead of looking to get his. They have the talent. They've had the talent for a really long time. But as many jokes as we make about other clubs and about, the issues that they have and things like that, isn't it weird that there's not as much talk about United, considering they're like Tottenham and Arsenal? United spent twice as much as Tottenham and Arsenal this year. And so shouldn't they be considered a title contender? And when they're not, that speaks to the incompetence of the managerial or of either the manager or ownership altogether. Do I think that they bought the right players for the money that they have? Probably not. I mean, they've overpaid for some of the talent that they have, but they still have a ton of talent. I agree with you. They're a contender. They are not the favorite, though, by any stretch of the imagination. I would probably put them third on that board behind Arsenal, who's in first right now, and then Manchester City, because we all know what Pep is capable of doing. But this is a team that should be considered a contender for the title every year with what they spend, and I think they finally are because they're competently managed.
You're right. They should be. Every year they should be. I mean, they're the biggest, one of the biggest, certainly top 3, what you call franchises or names of clubs in the world in terms of wealth. They can buy who they want whenever they want to, pretty much every year. As you say, they've spent the amount they've spent is ridiculous, and most of the clubs can dream of having the money that Manchester United have at their disposal. They've just invested it unwisely. They haven't got the right dynamic in the dressing room. It looks like now they may have, or they're going that way. There still seems like a couple of volatile characters in there that could upset the apple cart, but it's looking good. But yeah, absolutely. For decades, Man United have had the most money. They've been right up there in the Premier League, and before the Premier League in what was the first division. So yes, they should be there every year, and it's been a few years of mismanagement. Absolutely.
All right, point number 2, Chris. Which team is the biggest challenger to Arsenal right now?
I think it's got to be Manchester City. Arsenal are going really, really well. You wonder how long they can keep going for. And we've thought this about Manchester City a few years ago when they were the newcomers to trying to win titles. Now they're the old heads. They're the guys who've been there and done it. And I think Arsenal, if they pick up another injury or two, I think they could be in trouble. City, like I say, they've been there, done it, but also they've got the squad depth. So they could get an injury or two, you wouldn't even notice it, and it has happened. And so, yeah, they're City. They're going through a little bit of a spell. My word, I mean, Haaland's not scored for 3 games. He's in a goal drought. So, heaven forbid, But yeah, City for sure, to me, are their biggest rivals.
City, they're a horror movie villain, right? Like, until I lay eyes on Rebecca Lowe doing a post-match interview with the analysts and Tim Howard and whoever else is on the panel with her, breaking down someone else having hoisted silver, I'm going to believe that it's going to be City and Pep Guardiola. That's just what it's going to be. They have talent like crazy. I do believe they've even slightly underachieved while Arsenal has overachieved, and that's left us where they are. But they have more depth than everybody else does. They'll figure out how to use Grealish the right way with De Bruyne and everybody on the field at the same time. These things are going to work out. Haaland's going to obliterate the EPL single season goals record. So City, it's like watching Halloween. Michael Myers isn't dead just because Michael Myers gets stabbed, right? Or get hit with a car or something like that. They're Freddy, they're Jason, they're Michael Myers, they're whoever else you want to throw in there. That's what City are. And when we get to the season and City doesn't win, I will believe they're going to win until I am proven otherwise. Am I wrong to look at it as that much of a foregone conclusion? Now, the Champions League's a different story, but the EPL title, yeah, I absolutely think that it's City's to lose pretty much every year.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. And I think they've hit this blip, City have, and they always do. They always do it, and it's happened every year. They lose a couple of games, and everybody's going, "Oh, City are blowing up." And then Pep, he seems calm and collected, and he doesn't blow up in the media. In his interviews, he stays calm. He's like, the guys are doing well, but they're working on it in training. And in my opinion, sometimes I think they forget that they've got Haaland up front, because Man City, you're watching them play, and I watched them play in the Manchester derby. First half, Haaland was making runs, and it would have been a longer ball that City had to play, but they missed it. They didn't see it because they're almost fixated on playing this 5-yard, 10-yard, 15-yard pass, when a 20, 25-yard pass would put Haaland in, because he's like a racehorse and he can outpace most of the defenders. And they didn't see that. And you saw him make those runs a couple of times, and then he stopped making the runs after a while, because he thought, well, I'm just not going to get this, or I'm going against the way we play. So I think they've got a little thing to iron out there with him. He obviously started off really well, so there's no problem at the beginning. But it looks like they've got to be reminded that they do have that guy up there, and to use his strengths.
What are your thoughts on the way they're using Grealish? Because I would like to see in the midfield some level, instead of Grealish out on a wing, playing almost like a forward position that creates. I would like to see De Bruyne on one side. Like, honestly, I would like to not see it, especially this week. I hope they don't do it, because as a Spurs fan. But I'd love to see De Bruyne on one side of the midfield and Grealish on the other side of the midfield. I thought it was amazing kind of doing that for Villa, just being box to box.
Yeah, I really like Grealish. And it looks to me like he's playing with a handbrake on. He's playing like he doesn't want to do too much, for fear of upsetting Pep and upsetting the Manchester City way. He's a guy who can run with the ball. He'll carry it 10, 15, 20 yards. And he might do that 4 times, but he'll score a goal, or he did with Villa. He always looked like a threat, and now he looks scared to really let loose. He looks scared to shoot. He looks like he's playing with a handbrake on. I'd like to see him given a lot more freedom. If I was, I'd love Pep to say, go out there and just play. Just play what's in front of you. Play what you see. If you think you can take him on and go for it. But because we haven't seen the Grealish of Villa in this Man City team, and it's a shame.
Point number 3, Chris, is it time for Spurs to sell Harry Kane and rebuild?
Well, I don't know. Do you have to do both? I think a lot of that depends on Harry Kane and what he wants. You'd like to think that they could do both. It's amazing that Spurs are in this situation, quite frankly, that they have got to rebuild. They've spent a ton of money over the summer, and they look further back now, and you'll know better than me. You're being a Spurs fan, you'll watch them more than I do. But it looks like it looks like they're completely at sea. And then for 30 minutes in a game, they'll play like they all know each other and they've been together for 10 years. they play like strangers most of the time. It looks like Harry Kane doesn't know his best role. It looks like Son's not sure what he's supposed to be doing now. It looked like before last year even, that they were on the same page and the telepathy was working. Now it looks like that telepathy's gone. I don't know if Richarlison is suiting Harry Kane, if you can play them at the same time, if you can get the best of those two. But I think it'll be down to Harry Kane, and maybe his patience and loyalty is wearing thin. And if he does go, obviously it is big rebuild money and big rebuild time.
Yeah, the thing, I think there's like a weird narrative around Harry Kane that I don't think people realize how awesome he is, right? And a lot of it's, there are those moments, right? One, he's never won silver, so I get that. Two, yes, he bottled it again in the World Cup. That happened. But he's still sitting on 15 goals right now. He's on pace to have the most prolific season in his entire career as far as goal scoring is concerned. And there's no discussion of how well Harry Kane's playing right now. It's just, what's wrong with Harry Kane? What's wrong with Spurs? You bottled it. That's the only thing that I see on social media and from pundits out there. But what I will say this: Conte is not playing a system that fits the players that he has, and Conte does not have enough players. So it's a little bit of both there, and I do think it's probably time to send Harry Kane somewhere else where he can go. Like, if you put Harry Kane at United right now, what would United be? I mean, they'd be unbelievable. But if you do, you want to do that? No, but you're not going to spend the money to surround Harry Kane with the talent that it's going to take for him to be able to finally break through and win silver. Now, here's the one caveat I'll say, Chris. There were more reports this morning about the Qatari group that wants to be able to buy a Premier League team, and the only one they've met with is Tottenham. If they buy Spurs, no, you don't sell Harry Kane, because then you're going to go buy a championship. But they're in this place right now where Levy's tried to win the way Chelsea does while spending literally half the money Chelsea does. And that's not going to get it done. And they've wasted this window of having a generational talent that's one of their own in Harry Kane. Having Son, they've wasted that window right now. And the best they have to show for it's one Champions League final where a handball decides the entire thing. That's Levy's blown this. And if he's not going to spend the money. I don't care who they hire and promise that they'll allow to spend money. They're not going to. They're closer to what Newcastle and Villa spend than what Chelsea and United and City spend. So they can't win silver right now as they're currently constructed. And if you're not going to sell the club, then you have to sell Harry Kane, in my opinion.
Yeah, all true. All true. I think you can get away with not spending if you've got that gel, if you've got the team spirit right, if you've got the right characters. But it looks like a lot of the time they're all playing like strangers, and the money has been spent previously, and yet they still seem a mile away. It's almost as though they're trying to do that. Someone's deliberately not trying to make Spurs better. It's like they're trying not to improve, because it's looking good. They buy a player or two, then they're back a step, and then they go again. Then they buy someone else, then they're back. They just never seem to buy the right guys, and they're forever short in one department or another. It's not like they're not spending money; they're not spending enough money, but the money they are spending, they're not spending wisely.
Yeah, I will say, so just foot to the fire this summer. If you're Levy, Harry Kane says he wants to go, do you sell him?
Well, that's a tricky one. That's a tough one. I mean, Levy, he's going to hold out till the last day of the window. I think you're going to get an unhappy Harry Kane. So if you've got an unhappy Harry Kane, you've still got him, then you might as well let him go, get some money, and get some happy players in. Because last summer he almost went on strike, did Harry Kane, didn't he? Didn't he come back to training late? Yeah. Because he wanted to go. So if the same thing happens this season, I could see big problems. So yeah, foot to the fire. Yeah, I would sell him.
Point number 4, Chris. Did Manchester City make a mistake selling Jesus and Zinchenko to Arsenal?
God, that was a strange one, wasn't it? I thought at the time that was weird, but at the time, who'd have thought that Arsenal were going to have the season that they're having? But it's almost like City went, well, okay, where are you light? Where are you short? Where do you need strengthening? Okay, well, front, yeah, we'll give you Jesus, and you want a Premier League defender. Won a couple of titles. Zinchenko, he's at the top of his game. Zinchenko's playing really well. They got an injury to Arsenal had an injury to Tierney, so Zinchenko comes in, fills that space. Very strange. You don't normally. It's a big no-no to sell to your competition, and I really don't get it. And maybe Manchester City have that much money that they really don't care. They just think that we'll just outspend the opposition. But it was a weird one, real weird one.
Jesus, to me, I completely understand. There were times that he showed sparks. There were also a lot of times he was doing too much, right? Like he tried to do it all on his own, it seemed like. So I didn't have a problem with them selling him. You got 45 million pounds, and let's also be very honest. It's simple mathematics. Would you rather have Holland or Jesus? You really have Holland, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's simple math of I can't keep this guy and bring in probably the best young player in the world. I'm going to bring in the best young player in the world when I'm given the opportunity to, because if they didn't, someone else was going to. So you had to sell him. You made 45 million pounds. It's not like he's played a ton. Let's be honest, right? So he's dealt with injuries as well. And he's not been an incredible difference maker for Arsenal. He's been good. Don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say he's why Arsenal's getting it done. Now, the one thing I would say, Zinchenko's a different story, because Zinchenko, it's weird what he does, and that he doesn't kind of overlap as a fullback, right? He kind of breaks into the middle and then works almost like as a point forward in basketball a little bit. So I do think Zinchenko's brought something new to Arsenal. And I think that Jesus can do something when it comes to bringing some fire and maybe attacking spirit to Arsenal. That from a mindset standpoint, I think that they're both pluses. But I think Zinchenko on the pitch brings something different to the table, and a different mindset to the table as well, with some of the back four that Arsenal has right now.
Yeah, I think Jesus really got him going. He was exactly what they need to get that momentum going, because he was scoring for Arsenal, and he got him off to a great start. He hasn't played for a while now, a few weeks, because of injury, but he got him going, and he replaced Aubameyang. He was the guy he was the number 9, and maybe he had some he was playing with freedom. He was playing better at the start of this season for Arsenal than we've seen him, and freer than we've seen him play for Man City, because maybe he felt like his hands were tied a little bit with Man City. So yeah, with that freedom, he was more of the main man. He got them going, and they haven't missed him since he's been injured. You're right; the goals are shared around the team, which is great for Arsenal. That's always healthy if you've got that. If you've got more than one player that can score, which they have, wonderful. Zinchenko, I think he also, as well as you're right, he just come in and plays like a midfield player, but he's got that experience as well. Arsenal were a young team, 1-0, and he can be that calming influence at the back or midfield, just generally in the changing room throughout the team. He seems like a level-headed guy, and he looks like him and Jesus. They've both won Premier Leagues. No, I don't think anyone in the Arsenal team will have. And they bring that stability and that perhaps calm when the pressure gets on. Maybe they'll really show some value then.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that helps, though, having those two guys for Arsenal. I'm not trying to diminish what they mean for Arsenal, but I'm just saying I don't know that City necessarily is missing them, and that's why City's second in the table right now, or they should regret it yet. If we get to the end of the season and Jesus ends up with 17 goals and Zinchenko, you know what I mean? Like it's just they're continuing to dominate. Well, then maybe I would revisit this conversation. But how much do you think having that championship pedigree, 4 titles, I think, for Zinchenko, for those guys, how much do you think having that championship pedigree helps in the training grounds and things like that, and it'll in that locker room, and then with that club and with the players behind the scenes, especially those young guys, showing them how to prepare for a match week the right way, show them how to react when you're down 1-0, like you mentioned, things like that I think that they have brought to the table for Arsenal that are incredibly valuable. But I don't know that it necessarily hurts Man City, the fact that they don't have them.
I think it hurts Man City because Arsenal have them. It doesn't hurt Man City because they don't have them. But if Leeds had them, fine. If anyone else had them, that'd be okay. But Arsenal, I mean, they had no idea that Arsenal were going to have. I'm sure if you'd have told them how it was going to play out with Arsenal's start, I'm sure they would have thought again and who they sold them to. So I think that's where it hurts them. It hasn't really weakened Man City. They've got a better replacement for Haaland, for Jesus, for Haaland replacing Jesus. But yeah, who they've sold them to, I think it's biting them now.
Point number 5, Chris. Has the EPL grown to having 8 big clubs instead of 6?
Well, I think just a bit of sort of backstory, it was 4. and now it's 5. No, now it's 6, and there might be 7. Newcastle coming in. That 8th one is going to be really tough to break into. You need massive amounts of money, and winning you the title doesn't automatically make you break into that top table. Leicester City is a perfect example of this. You'd have thought Leicester, after winning the Premier League, would now be dining at the top table, attracting all sorts of players. It didn't happen because Leicester, they had a wonderful season, but after that, they didn't have the resources to back that up and buy the best players in the world and attract them to Leicester City. So it was literally a blip now. So if Leicester can't break in after winning the Premier League, it just takes a Newcastle. It takes a Newcastle with massive owners. So you've got, and the last team into that top group were Manchester City. And there we've got Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs. Newcastle are 7. But before it was 6, before City arrived, it was at 5 for a good while. City with the money, and I say money, and I don't begrudge them the money because that's the way it goes. Those 5 other clubs before City arrived, they were the ones with the money. Regardless of where it came from, they were the ones with the money. They have been for decades. And Man City broke in. All of a sudden, who's this dining at our top table? Who's this breaking into our club? Now Newcastle are coming in. It's a global game, and the big argument is, well, but they're bringing in money from other countries. Well, you've been buying players from other countries for decades. So it's a global game. So we're not going to have the players from other countries or the money from other countries. It's just opened up. It's boom. And those big 5 or big 4, as they were, big 5, they're all of a sudden they're begrudging this next team coming in and having to share the spoils with another one. So who's the 8th one? The top 8. It's going to be tricky. It's going to need a massive investor because if you look at the league, you got Fulham, Brighton, and Brentford up there. They're miles away. They're not even close to being one of the top 8. After that, the next one, you're looking at perhaps Villa as a big club, but they would need massive investment. So now I think with Newcastle arriving, you've got 7. And then that 8th one is going to be tough, but it's great. It's slowly building.
I've asked you over the years, and one thing that I've always kind of picked your brain about was why isn't Villa a big club? Because there was at a time that Villa was a big club, right?
Oh yeah, there was, yeah. But we're going back for titles. A European title, what was the Champions League? They won in the 80s. And you still had to beat the best. You had to beat the best in Europe. You had to beat your Bayern Munichs and Juventuses and your AC Milans and Liverpools and all that to win. So yeah, they were. But since then, they just haven't had that massive investment that the top 6, 7 with Newcastle have had. So without that, you just cannot afford. You can't buy, and let's face it, you're buying your Ronaldo's at Man United, you're buying the Ronaldos and your top players, your Haalands from all around the world, and you've got to have that if you're going to break in on a regular basis. And that's what we're talking about here, the top 7 or top 8. It's got to be a regular basis, not just a one season, one off.
I will say there's not a top 8, and there still is a big 6. And really the way that it's going right now is you have 3 clubs that can spend money like crazy. And then you have 3 clubs that can't quite spend as much money, or I guess maybe 4 that can. Really, it's you have Chelsea, United, and City that will spend £200 million plus. You have Liverpool, who will get somewhere in that neighborhood. And then you have Arsenal and Spurs, who are about £100 million a year behind where Chelsea, City, and United are. So I look at it, there is a drop off there. But then if you look at Villa's actually spending more than Arsenal right now. Now, Arsenal's in a place where they've just rebuilt and they've just gone young. So those players aren't making as much money yet. That will change. But Villa's spending the kind of money that you would think it would take to be able to compete in a top 4 spot. And Newcastle's not quite there yet. I think we can get to 8 big clubs. We're just not there yet. And I can't say that it's grown that far. But I agree with you as far as the order we're looking at. Probably Newcastle is number 7. Villa is number 8. But wasn't there a story you told me one time that when they created the EPL, Villa decided not to join, and that's what got them left behind? or something in that something in that neighborhood that they decided not to get on board with the big clubs, and that kind of left them behind as a small club.
Possibly they're against the big investment, but I think they made the jump when they did. But that was I'll tell you what happened when the Premier League did start. There was money ploughed into all the clubs that were in the Premier League. And so if you're outside of the Premier League, if you happen to be relegated that one year, then you missed out on the big influx. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, and then it was hard to recover because those that were in there to start with, they did okay. And some mismanaged it and are no longer in the Premier League, but those who used it wisely. But to be honest with you, before the Premier League, it was still Manchester United, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, they were the top 5, top 4 or 5, for decades.
Point number 6, Chris, is James Ward-Prowse the best player outside of the big 6 clubs?
I really like James Ward-Prowse, and he's making headlines at the moment because he's close to David Beckham's free kick record in the Premier League. For him to do what he's doing at Southampton and making the headlines at Southampton, breaking into the England team, and that's always difficult when you don't play in one of the big 6 teams. He's got to be up there as one of the best ones. It depends what position you're looking at, of course, and it's hard to compare like for like because you got great defenders who are outside midfield, holding midfield. The other guy I like, he would be my pick, James Ward-Prowse. Yes. The other one I like is Zaha. I've always liked Wilfried Zaha. He always looks a bit miserable on the field. Maybe he's got good reason to. His ability, with all due respect to Crystal Palace, his ability perhaps is he could have earned a move to a bigger club, bigger contract by moving away. So maybe he's carried that around with him. But credit to him, he gives everything. He never looks like he's switched off and checked out, like I'm not doing this for this manager. He always seems to give everything. So as a goal scorer, out and out goal scorer, Zaha, I love him. But scoring a few goals, he'll add 5, 6, 7 goals from central midfield. Score you free kicks, play other players in. I think James Ward-Prowse, yeah.
And so for me, I looked at it this way. There were 3 guys that I kind of broke down. One was James Ward-Prowse. 2, James Madison. I went with him. And then Declan Rice. And if I had to tell you, for rank those, it's like, and I probably should have Zaha there as well. But if I told you could have Ward-Prowse or Madison on Wolves right now, which one would you take?
I'd take Ward-Prowse. For he seems more reliable and more consistent. I'll take both if you offered them to me. But if I had to take one, I'd take Ward-Prowse. But yeah, Madison was in my thinking as well, and Declan Rice. Great, again, he's not going to get you many goals, but he's worth his weight in gold to a team for the role that he does. That holding midfield player, box to box, more holding, breaks a lot of plays up. Yeah, there's some, and he's looking at a move probably. In fact, most of these players will be looking at a move in the summer. But yeah, for me, just James Ward-Prowse over Madison, but Madison isn't far behind.
I think that as we're playing, Ward-Prowse is probably. I'll take Madison over Ward-Prowse, but when you throw in the goals that he has from free kicks and the way that he affects free kicks even when he doesn't have a goal, because of the way that you absolutely have to panic whenever he steps in to take a free kick. I just think that adds an extra element that gives you more opportunity. And because of that, I'll take Ward-Prowse as well. All right, point number 7, Chris. What's wrong with Everton this season?
God, what's wrong with Everton? Everton's a strange one for me because they've I read where that since 2016 they've spent just £1 million more than Liverpool have, and and they just haven't progressed at all. And it's weird because they brought in every manager, decent managers. Carlo Ancelotti, he's won everything everywhere in Europe. He's won whatever league he's gone to. I think he's the only manager that's won every major league. Rafa Benitez, great manager with Liverpool. Martinez, he's done a decent job wherever he's gone. He's not taken. I don't think he's taken clubs down, but it's decent pedigree. Lampard, you could question the fors and against in hiring Lampard, but the fans are so passionate, and yet they're obviously blaming the board. And it's hard to see without knowing inside. It's hard to know exactly why, because they have spent money as much as Liverpool have. They've been buying the wrong players. It's never seemed to gel. They buy another player and it's one step forward, two steps back. And it just seems like an annual struggle for them, which again isn't unusual for teams at the bottom half of a lot of the clubs at the bottom half of the table. Your Wolves, your Palace, your Fulhams, your Brentford, Bournemouth. It's an annual struggle for most teams, but there seems to be now this poison amongst the fans against the board, and I think from what I can gather, the fans are complaining about the lack of transparency and the lack of communication from the board. They're supposed to be building a stadium, and they don't know who or when or whose money is going to be buying it. And so, to be honest, where there could be a problem, it seems like there is a problem. So it looks like they're in a mess.
We mentioned this last week that number 2 at Everton right now in assists on the year, tied for number 2 is Jordan Pickford. So that's where when they brought in Ancelotti, Everton built to bring in a lot of guys who are holding midfielders that can also make the pass that sets up the pass. And so there were guys that you didn't have to be as strong at the back. I think they're very strong at the back right now, Everton is. But you didn't have to be as strong at the back, and you had guys that would play a ball in, and then somebody else would pushing it into the attacking third. And you had Calvert-Lewin is a fantastic goal scorer, right? You have goal scoring options there. It just seems like there's nobody right now to make the pass that sets up the pass that gets you into the attacking third and having those scoring threats. The last time Everton scored multiple goals in a game was October 22nd. That's a long time ago right now, was where, pushing past mid-January. So offensively, I think they have problems. Defensively, it's not like they're getting blown out 4-1 or anything like that. I mean, that's not the way that it's going down. They have players, especially the center back position, I think, but they don't have enough when it comes to midfield. They don't have enough when it comes to attacking players. And when they rebuilt around what Ancelotti wanted, they still have a lot of those guys there, and they're not fitting with what the new managers want to do. I would also say Frank Lampard's not good enough. I would also say that he's just not a good enough manager, and he wasn't particularly good at Chelsea, and he's not particularly good there. So that I would have already made that move, and I would have done that during the World Cup if I was Everton. Just said this isn't working, because there's absolutely no reason. Everton's spending is closer to what Tottenham and Arsenal are spending in Newcastle and Villa. They're kind of in that neighborhood when it comes to the amount of money that they've spent on payroll right now, and it's just not working, as opposed to what Southampton's spending right now, or Forest or Brentford, or those teams. So if you're spending triple what Wolves is spending right now, or double what Wolves has, triple what some of the other smaller clubs, you should be getting better than you're getting right now, and they're not. That's on Lampard. I'm not saying he's the problem, but he's definitely not the solution, so find someone else. But it does seem like they brought in a very particular type of player, and it doesn't necessarily fit with the last couple of managers since Ancelotti left. It doesn't fit what they want to necessarily do. But Decore, Decore, people like that, that's who I'm looking at as guy that could stop, but he could also make the pass that sets up your attacking players to then make the pass into the final third.
Yeah, and they keep trying to fill that gap in midfield and around the number 9. And James was one that they got from the last who started in the last World Cup from Colombia. Didn't work out for whatever reason. Didn't work out. It never seems to work out, and that's not the board's problem that I see. When a player comes into a dressing room, the board aren't there to welcome him and give him the G up, and the board aren't out on the training field. The players don't see the board. They don't care about the board, quite frankly. So all these new players that are coming in that aren't working, it's something more than the board. And the fans, that's their issue, the board. Okay, but the players, it's just weird. Now they're brought in a new technical director, Kevin Threlfall, who was the technical director at Wolves. You could say big deal, but he was the guy who brought the players into Wolves, who got them from the Championship to the Premier League. And at Wolves, he was really popular up until there was a bit of friction with the new Chinese owners, and then he decided to go. So they've got an experienced guy there for bringing in the right players to play like at least a good Championship mid-level Premier League team. So maybe it'll turn around. But like you say, Lampard doesn't seem to be cutting it. There's a big game this weekend coming up. it remains to be seen. But there's like I say, there's problems everywhere you look. There's problems for Everton wherever there could be. It's an issue right now, and they are a club in crisis.
All right, point number 8, Chris. Why hasn't it worked for Conte at Spurs?
Well, you got an hour on this one.
I was going to say, we should have just done a single show about that.
They always seem so close, Spurs. They just seem so close. They've got... it's hard to put your finger on because they've got players like Romero at the back and Dyer at the back. Now, Dyer, he's not outstanding, but he's got a mistake in him. But most clubs in the Premier League would take Dyer. If most outside the top 6, you take a Kieran Dyer with his experience, and I can see you smiling. Maybe you're ready to write to get the taxi for him. I don't know what you think of Dyer.
It's not on him. I'll say that. It's not on Dyer. You could do better, but it's easier to do worse than it is do better than what Eric Dyer is right now.
Right. So you got some experience in the back. You got the front line that terrifies clubs and has terrified teams over the last 3 years on the fast break, even without the fast break. And you got Kane, who you say is strangely underrated by so many. There isn't a club in the world who wouldn't want Harry Kane. Son just seems out of sorts. You don't know. Conte, he always gives mixed messages. Now, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt. When England is their second language, there's little nuances. You can make a statement, and an English person the person whose English is first language, you go, "Oh, would you say that?" But maybe to him, he's innocently saying it. Or where we might go, "Oh, there's a hidden message there," or that's a bit of double speak there. Is he getting a message to Daniel Levy? We don't know. But Conte's wily. He does give those. He's been known in his other clubs to give out those messages to the owners. So again, similar to Everton, problems at board level with the manager. And on the pitch, it's really sporadic. Again, Will, you'll know better than me on this. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say on this point. But and they've spent money. There's money there to be spent. They've got a massive stadium. This beautiful stadium, one of the best in the world. So it's not all bad. And I joked at the beginning about Crimea River. When you look at every team below Spurs, they'd all go, "What crisis?" They're 5th, 6th at the minute. That'd be fantastic for most teams, but it's not clicking. It's not what Spurs want. Spurs do want a trophy, silverware of any kind right now. I imagine most Spurs fans would take a trophy over top 4. I don't know this year, just to say they won a trophy and stay in Europe. But yeah, it's a mess. And without guessing anymore, I'll hand it over to the Spurs expert here to you.
Yes, while you choose not to speculate wildly, I will speculate. So I have strong opinions on this. Look, here, it's twofold. One, Levy brings in Conte, and the board brings in Conte, and they tell them they're going to spend, and then they won't let them spend. It's not as if their payroll's increased. It really hasn't. So they've sold off a lot of Lo Celso and they've sold off a lot of players. They haven't brought in the players to be able to replace them. Royal does not need to be on a Big Six team. He's not good enough. So it's also when you look at the players, Kane, Son, who else? Like if you're supposed to be a Big Six team, who else scares you that's on Spurs right now that you think can score? Session's not that guy. Lucas Moura is going away from the team and he's injured right now, so it doesn't matter anyway. Matt Doherty, they don't have real wing backs, so it's not like they bought in the wing backs that Conte wants to run his style. I also think what Conte wants to do doesn't fit the current players that they have. So they ran a 3-4-2-1 last time with Son kind of in the middle, and then they had Sessignon on the left side at the wing back instead of Son playing on the outside. I just don't think it fits what Spurs have as far as their players. And what that means is Højbjerg, instead of being a holding midfielder that can pass incredibly well and can go box to box, ends up having to play almost in an attacking midfielder role. And I just don't think that's the best role for him. So you just have a lot of guys that are kind of playing out of position, trying to fit into what Conte wants to do when Conte doesn't have the players. But it's not like when you look at wingbacks right now, out of the outside, Is Doherty doing anything for you? Is that terrifying any team? Sessegnon, is that terrifying anyone? It's not. So you have Harry Kane, you have Son, you have Hugo Lloris, and other than that, you have a bunch of guys that you say, oh, that's a solid player, but they're not the type of player that if you want to be a team that's contending and winning silver, they're not that kind of player, and they flat don't have them on their roster, on their bench, in the academy level that we know of, anywhere. They just don't have enough talent to play the way that they want to and to try to win the way that it seems like they're trying to win right now. The board needs to come off of 70 million pounds a year. That's what they need to come off of when it comes to wages. For them to be only 30 million pounds a year behind the Chelseas, the Cities, and the Uniteds of the world. And if they won't do that, then they don't need to stop bringing in big managers. They need to blow this thing up and rebuild. But they don't have the players to run Conte's system, and that's on Conte for continuing to try to do that instead of working with what he has. But it's on the board that they don't have the players to work in the Conte system.
Yeah, the system is a big one, isn't it? And you can't understand why he keeps persisting with it if it's not working. And if you don't have the guys who can fill that system, or it doesn't suit their abilities. What about Kulusevski, Will? What do you think of him? Because I saw him the other day.
Yeah, really, really good pickup. He's been hurt, but he finally came back, and he was a very nice signing.
I saw him play again last weekend against Spurs, and he looked like he was against Arsenal. He looked like he was having a go. He's one at least positive. He was taking a couple of players on, cutting in from the right hand side, and letting a shot go. And he did it a couple of times, and then he failed. And then the one time, there was another time, it was a third time that it looked like he could have done it again. And it was a better opportunity than the first two. And it's like he didn't do it. He passed it on, and it didn't work out. And he should have gone for it. That was the time. So I don't know if his confidence was down a bit or what. But I hadn't seen him play much, and he looked really good.
Yeah, I really like him. I think that he is the answer that they haven't had since Dele Alli, kind of fell apart as a player. He's the answer to that. It's just, I mean, while you're having Son play in the middle instead of out on the outside, and you don't have wing backs, and you're continuing to try to run guys that are slow fullbacks out there at wing back, or not particularly great wings playing wing back, it hurts you defensively, it hurts you offensively, and frankly, Spurs just aren't good enough right now with the talent as they're currently constructed, with the talent that they have. Point number 9, Chris, target man, one player you're targeting to have a big match week this week.
Well, Newcastle keep trundling along, and they keep quietly doing it. He scored last week. He's back from injury. I think I got Alexander Isak. They're away at Palace, and the way Newcastle's team spirit is, I can see him playing him again, whether it's off the bench or starting, and I can see him scoring. So I've got him as my target man this week. Alexander Isak for Newcastle.
Yeah, we both kind of went with smaller clubs. So I guess Newcastle really isn't a smaller club, but I'll go with Brennan Johnson of Forest against Bournemouth this weekend. Bournemouth is falling apart. Like, they're just not. They're a team that is probably going to be relegated, in my opinion. They're not very good. They've lost a lot of matches in a row. And Brennan Johnson figured some things out. He had 2 goals against Leicester City. It was only his 4th on the season. I think he's good for a goal this weekend against Bournemouth as well for Forest. And I'd like to see him kind of get back into form. It's weird, I think, when guys trying to come back from the World Cup break and things like that. And so Brennan Johnson seems like one of those guys that's coming back well. And I think that we continue to see him create a little bit of a scoring streak against a struggling Bournemouth squad this weekend. Point number 10, Chris. Who finishes in the top 4? Who gets relegated? Let's start with the top 4. Give the teams you think finish in the top 4 right now.
Top 4. I've got the teams that are there now, only just a slightly different order on the 3 and 4. So, 1 and 2. I've got Man City and Arsenal. Man City winning it, then Arsenal, Man United, Newcastle.
I am going to make us one more change from what you have. I'll say City wins it. I'll say United's 2. I think Arsenal's 3. Yeah. Newcastle 4, though. Neither of us have Spurs. We don't have Liverpool. We don't have Chelsea in that top 4.
No, I think Liverpool, Chelsea are 10 points off Newcastle now. I think it's just too much to make up. They're not firing right. If they were in form, I'd say they got a chance. But yeah, I don't see them catching Newcastle. Spurs, I don't, unfortunately, either. I think those 3, Spurs, Liverpool, Chelsea, they're just in this revamp, and with injuries and one thing and another, it's just they're all at sea a little bit. So yeah, Newcastle in that top 4. That's a big change. Yeah,
so I and both of us have them there. Are we not talking enough about Liverpool struggles this year? Because we've talked about Chelsea, that they bought on the wrong players. Spurs, they haven't spent enough money. Liverpool's spending a lot of money and they're not getting a lot of bang for their buck. And I know, don't get me wrong, Jurgen Klopp's a fantastic manager and he's won a title for Liverpool and they've won a Champions League as well. So I'm not saying get rid of him or anything like that, but man, the way that they rebuilt this thing, it hasn't gone to plan necessarily. Now they have the money to be able to buy on the players they need to fix whatever mistakes they made when it came to the rebuild process, but it hasn't been as smooth as I thought it was going to be.
No, it hasn't. I'm sure they've been surprised by it. Although there's a few players that are sort of getting to the end of their careers now. James Milner's one. Van Dijk is a big miss because he's injured. Van Dijk at the back. I mean, without him, they had a big issue with central defenders at the start of last season. So they're struggling because of that. They're just not clicking. I'm sure that Liverpool will come good. They keep talking about not having enough money, but Liverpool always find money from somewhere, and they're a big draw because they can pay the wages. They'll have the money, and I think Liverpool they'll come good. They're just in that transitional phase, but yeah, they're not clicking with the buys that they bought. But I'm sure Klopp being Klopp, I think he'll turn them around.
All right, your three teams you think get relegated.
All righty. Well, I'm going Everton at the back, at the bottom. They've not been relegated since 1955, and that's why this is a bit of a jolt. Yeah, it's been a jolt to their fans. They're not used to be in this position. You know, Everton are normally top 8, top 10. So Everton, because they're on the slide. Southampton had a good win the other day, but I can't see them getting out of trouble. And Bournemouth, you mentioned Bournemouth earlier on. They haven't won for so many games. They're just losing game after game after game. I think they've won once since October the 1st, maybe twice, Bournemouth, since October the 1st, and that was against Leicester and Everton. They haven't beaten anybody. Leicester were in trouble at the time when they beat Leicester. So yeah, Everton, Southampton, and Bournemouth are mine.
Yeah, I have the same three. I'll go with a little bit of a different order. I'll say Bournemouth's at the very back. I'll take I have Southampton and then I have Everton. So I think Everton at some point in time has a run in them. Now, if Lampard is not replaced, they don't have a run in them. I honestly think that, but it seems as if they're going to continue to run with Lampard, and if that happens, they're going to fail. And you're right, for them to be relegated for the first time since the 1950s is just utterly incredible.
Big news. Yeah, that will be big news if they go down. Because they're one of the stalwarts. When you think of 70s, 60s, 50s, Everton are there. Everton, that was, well, during the 50s, 60s, 70s, that was where Everton were winning titles and championships and trophies. And then in the 80s, they had a really strong team, Everton. And then since then, they've just been kind of middle of the road. They were doing great with David Moyes. He was always finishing around 6th, 7th, 8th. And then it's be careful what you wish for. They wanted something better, something different, and they got rid of Moyes. And then it's been sort of not down. Well, it has slowly downhill ever since.
All right, final point, Chris. Point number 11, match of the week and upset pick of the week.
Well, I'm being a Wolves fan again, looking at the bottom of the league on my match of the week. West Ham, Everton I've got. It's the Moyes versus Lampard showdown, because I think whoever loses that one, I think they might be out of a job. I really do. And so, yeah, it's a massive game at the bottom. A win for either of these teams can't change the season around, but it'll really give them a good lift. So that's my match of the week. Upset of the week. Hard to see a big upset, to be honest with you. Arsenal, Man United. If Manchester United have been riding their luck a little bit, and I think they'll keep riding their luck, and I could see United just pinching a 2-1 win. I guess that would be an upset if they go away to Arsenal and beat Arsenal. They've been riding their luck, like I say. How Rashford wasn't deemed interfering offside the other day, and when that goal was given against for him or for United to equalise against Wolves. And I'm over it though. But yeah, they've been riding their luck, and I can see Man United just sneaking it at Arsenal.
I actually have Liverpool Chelsea as my match of the week, and the biggest reason is just both of those teams need to win really badly right now. What happens to Graham Potter if they lose that match too? Right, you're spending a ton of money to bring him in, and so would they give him more than that? Yeah, probably. another match or so. But Graham
Mm.
Potter right now is living dangerously and kind of whistling past the graveyard that he's still there. And at some point in time, you don't spend that kind of money without reacting to it and making a move at a managerial position. For Liverpool to have any kind of shot, they need to have a run, and they need to start a run right now. I agree with you. 10 points to get caught up to the top four right at this point is probably too much to overcome. But if they're going to overcome it, now this needs to be the time. So give me Chelsea against Liverpool, plus two big clubs going head-to-head. And I agree with you. My upset pick of the week is United against Arsenal. United is a massive underdog against Arsenal. Absolutely massive. I mean, about 3-1 underdog against Arsenal at Arsenal this week. I just maybe I should believe in them. And I'm a big fan of Arteta, and I love the fact that they rebuilt young the way that they have, and I love the young players that are there. But again, maybe it's just the Spurs fan and I'm being a hater, but I cannot believe that Arsenal's going to continue winning against, especially a team that has twice their payroll, that seems to have it figured out with a more proven manager. I just think that we see United get it done against Arsenal at Arsenal this weekend. Chris, fantastic job. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Will. You too, mate. Thanks a lot.
And we'll be back on Monday, starting 11 on 99, starting 11 on YouTube, not on the radio that I almost gave out the call signal for.